Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thanks again for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. Up first here on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got a high wind watch out for the Alaska range here. That's for tomorrow into tomorrow evening, and that's looking for winds to increase from the south and southeast and gusts possibly as high as 70 miles per hour. And out to the west, we've got another high wind watch here for the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the eastern Aleutians. And that's for Tuesday for these areas. And of course, it'll pick up there in the eastern Aleutians sooner than the Alaska Peninsula, but not too much longer after. Looking for gusts possibly as high as 80 miles per hour ahead of that intense frontal system. High wind warning out for tonight for the AKwx area. Look for gusts 80 miles per hour, possibly a little higher. That's out through tonight. And then the one out here in the west, that warning's out until 10 p.m. this evening for Shemya. Again, for those gusts that today we're gusting 70 to 80 miles an hour. That'll continue again until about 10 p.m. this evening. Satellite imagery shows the massive cloud shield associated with that big storm right through here somewhere, the boundary of it. And so it's very close to Shemya currently, and the cloud spreading in over the AKwx area. Otherwise, low pressure here off the southwest coast. Still that upper level low that's slipped down last week and became mostly stationary now over the northern Bering, and that'll begin to lift back to the north as this storm pushes east. But lots of snow showers here from the Kuskokwim Bay area right down into the Alaska Peninsula to about Unalaska, much lighter down through here. And then we had this area of snow lift northward that came up from Kodiak Island overnight, and that kicked off some thunderstorms today that started over southern Cook Inlet and moved right up into Resurrection Bay. Areas moderate snow reported, like Sparavon had some moderate snow at times as that moved northward. So a few inches of snow probably fell with that. Back down toward Bristol Bay, they had up to 4 to 8 inches in Iliamna in those areas. And for the southeast coast, another storm here moving north off the coast. Heaviest wind and rain occurring down over the south, at least initially today, with Metlakatla and Annette picking up 1.5 inches of rain in a 12-hour period ending at about 2 p.m. this afternoon, while Ketchikan had 1 3/4 inches of rain. By contrast, just 1/100 of an inch at Sitka, but it started raining there just about an hour ago. So that amount will probably be heavier by the time the system moves on through. Otherwise, some scattered showers here for the North Gulf Coast, and there's thunderstorms that broke out over the southwest Prince William Sound area, mostly toward Resurrection Bay, but an area of snow lifting northward here with this weak low that's over northern Cook Inlet. High pressure, fair conditions, cold temperatures up here in the northeast, snow showers of the Bering Sea, next big storm pushing in. Again, that front with the rain and wind, Shemya, that'll advance again tonight with high wind warnings, gust 80 miles per hour into the central Aleutians. Winds later tonight start to increase there for the Fox Islands, and then winds become westerly, west-southwest, and start to drop off there, but definitely won't even come close to ending with the wind out over the western Aleutians. Still have this lingering low there near Kuskokwim Bay with an area of light snow associated with it from about Bethel on down into the Bristol Bay area, and then cutting off there right around Dillingham or Togiak Bay. Just isolated snow showers farther to the north, and this area of light snow continues to move northward here. Otherwise, the North Slope Arctic coast areas in the Yukon, Koyukuk Valley looking pretty good, although this will move into the Koyukuk Valley and Kobuk Valley overnight tonight. Scattered snow showers in the decreasing mode over the Copper River Basin. Look for some clearing. Next system pulling northward here spreads rain and snow, changing to rain into Kodiak Island, and it dries out over the southeast coast. A break in advance of the next system is going to come rapidly northward. And tomorrow moves to about this position here. Definitely these strongest winds will stay down, probably even south of Dixon Entrance across the Queen Charlotte Islands. You see a pickup in the wind as well as the rain again, but staying dry in the north. The system lifts northward, areas of snow or possibly mixed precipitation. South central Alaska, Cook Inlet, eastward across Prince William Sound. Should become rain, Cordova and Seward during the morning hours tomorrow. Otherwise variably cloudy, a few flurries up in the interior. Same thing for the central western Arctic coast. The strong front drives eastward, and wind and rain into the Alaska Peninsula. Strong winds around that low center. Really strong winds here across the northern Bering Sea. And the next day that front advances eastward, and it moves to right along Cook Inlet, just over to roughly the Chugach Mountains. So in advance of that, there'll be some pretty good southeast winds, like Turnagain Arm, be quite strong out of the east, and then the through the mountain passes, south central Alaska, look for possible gusts 70 miles per hour. North Gulf Coast, rain, heavy at times. Seward on over to Cordova, up into Prince William Sound, and that'll lighten up as you move over toward Yakutat. Chance of rain moves into the northern panhandle in the afternoon. High pressure keeps it dry and possibly partly to mostly sunny down to the south. Back to the west, low pressure weakens, but still 967 millibars there. South winds, probably gale force here with another shot of rain for the Fox Islands, eventually moving in toward the Alaska Peninsula. Gusty northwest winds and showers back to the west. Look for snow, St. Lawrence Island. Gusty winds in advance of that front across the Seward Peninsula into the west central interior. Otherwise, the north slope will be in a break, maybe some flurries on the Arctic coast. Looking at the forecast lows for tonight, below zero in the Brooks Range, locally into the upper Yukon Valley areas, single numbers, the Tanana Valley back over toward Kobuk, and maybe probably even Selawik as well, down below 10 degrees. 0 to 10 for the Arctic coast, teens otherwise for Kotzebue Sound, and mid-20s for the south central area to lower 30s along the North Gulf Coast, upper 30s to near 40 for the Panhandle, and all in the near 40 actually for the Aleutians, upper 20s there for Cold Bay. And the highs for tomorrow, mid-30s St. Lawrence Island, add 10 degrees to that for the Pribilofs, up near 50 for the central and eastern Aleutians, as well as the Alaska Peninsula, mostly in the 40s, upper 30s northern Bristol Bay, single numbers of Brooks Range up to 10 to 20 above for the Arctic coast, 30s south central Alaska, 40s again for the Panhandle. And then the lows tomorrow night, 30s for the southeast coast, a shade below zero up there in the Brooks Range, otherwise well above zero along the Arctic coast. Upper 20s to lower 30s in the southwest, lower 40s for the Aleutians, and upper 20s now for south central Alaska. Highs the next day, warmer air advancing the Alaska Peninsula near 50 degrees for the highs, upper 40s, cooling off out to the west. Teens, Brooks Range to the Arctic coast, 30s most everywhere else. And the southeast, or most everywhere else here over southern Alaska, 40s for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation, as far as IFR goes, there's a band associated with that strong, intense front coming in across the southwest Bering, moving across Adak, on into Atka later in the day. And also IFR up here along the northern Bristol Bay coast, Togiak Bay over to about Dillingham and inland a ways. IFR just south of Kodiak Island, otherwise marginal VFR on up into the central inlet. And then for Tuesday afternoon, we've got some marginal VFR. Central west side of the Arctic coast there, IFR just offshore. Band of marginal stuff there, central and eastern southern slopes of the Brooks Range. And also, actually, that area is kind of lifting northward, so that'll be late afternoon it reaches this point. IFR, western Cook Inlet, the Sitna Valley, IFR over the Panhandle with that next storm rolling in. And then for Wednesday morning, marginal VFR on the decrease, so better conditions for the Panhandle. Pretty good VFR through much of the central northern interior. IFR just touching the central Arctic coast there, but Copper River Basin VFR into the Manduska Valley, northern Cook Inlet, marginal VFR here for the Alaska Range, IFR south of Kodiak Island on the east side there, and over the southwest interior, big increase in the moisture here, and IFR back around into the Aleutians. Moving on to the afternoon, big swath of IFR up through here from St. Lawrence Island to the Yukon Delta, northeastward across the northern Koyukuk Valley up to the Brooks Range. Also widespread IFR now across southern Alaska, and that extends in across the northern Panhandle where the remainder of the area is marginal. Passes Anaktuvuk, marginal, or VFR becoming marginal again as that band of moisture lifts northward in the afternoon, so the lowest conditions will be on both southern approaches, VFR to the north. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, windy VFR, late in the afternoon becoming marginal. And for Isabel, VFR becoming marginal. And Mentasta, VFR. Tanita, VFR becoming marginal. And for Portage, marginal VFR with Chilkoot and White. Marginal VFR to start with becoming VFR, hopefully before noon. And for the freezing levels, we've got 2,000 feet here, quite a gradient now developing here up over the west coast of North America. And you can see 2,000 feet, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, and then up to 10,000 feet there across the Queen Charlottes. At the surface, up along the coast, on down Bristol Bay, and then north of St. Matthew Island now. And then with that strong storm, the warmer air on those south-southeast winds coming up 10,000 feet just south of the Aleutians, 8,000 feet to Adak and Atska, but 2,000 feet still well to the southwest of the Pribilofs and west of the eastern Aleutians. Icing areas of considerable moderate above 6,000 feet here, moving into the Pribilofs and moving northeast from the eastern Aleutians early into the Alaska Peninsula. More icing of the possible mixed variety out in the west, and then another zone here of widespread moderate rime icing possible over the southern southeast coast above about 6,000 feet, and isolated moderate here, otherwise light south central Alaska spreading northward, just about reaching the central Alaska Range. Jet stream, upper level low now, retreating back to the northwest as this powerful storm comes in from the west, kind of kicks it back up. Very strong southwest jet, 130 knots coming into the Alaska Peninsula, 100-knot westerlies cutting across the northern Kuskokwim Valley there, and Susitna Valley along the Alaska Range, 130-knot jet into the southern southeast coast. 9,000 feet, 75 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. Southeast here with this low drifting, pulling northward, so it'll be a narrow band of pretty strong winds here coming up to the North Gulf Coast and actually across south central Alaska. And these winds, strongest winds of this system, look like they'll stay to the south there, but you still see a wind increase across the southern Panhandle. That same pattern also at 3,000 feet. Call it 40 knots here coming up with this system, and 25 to 30 out of the southwest over the northeast interior. 55, 70 knot winds in advance of the front. Get into the low center, 65 knot winds. Strongest winds up over the northern Bering Sea. Turbulence, areas of severe here, Alaska Peninsula on the lee side, and also for the central and western Aleutians on out to the Komodorsky Islands. Moderate chop here through the south central area and in the northeast.
Winter, cold, wet, and deadly. Every year, snowstorms strand hundreds of people in their cars, isolate thousands in their homes, and kill those who are unprepared. In this film, you will see and hear true stories about 6 people caught in severe winter weather and isolated from help. Ed and Paul Maluski were going to their cabin to button it up for the winter when it began to snow.
The storm hit about halfway up the mountain. By the time we got about a mile from our cabin, we kept getting stuck every 10 feet.
We were always out digging, which got us wet. Then the snow got real heavy, and you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. It was pretty clear the Bronco wasn't going to make it, so we figured we'd walk to a neighbor's cabin. It wasn't real far, and we know that area like the back of our hands.
The funny thing is, everything changes at night. And with the blizzard, well, you couldn't tell which way you were going. I thought I knew, but boy, I just couldn't tell for sure.
Dad! Leave us back here! We don't need it! There's food in the cabin!
You know, it was funny. I'd be thinking real clear for a while, and then just didn't know what I was doing or where I was going. I couldn't even remember Paul's name, my own boy, and I couldn't remember his name.
I got worried wading through that snow. Dad was really beat. He could barely keep up. I started thinking about things I'd never thought about before. I fell and dropped our flashlight and didn't pick it up right away like you normally would. I knew we were getting delirious then. Then we hit that gate. Well, it's nowhere near the cabin.
We've gone too far! Let's go back to the Bronco!
Paul, we can't go back. We wouldn't make it. I wouldn't make it. We've got to find that cabin or we can't make it. Now, come on, we've got to find that cabin.
From then on, I just kept thinking, you gotta keep going. You gotta keep pushing.
I saw that cabin and said one long prayer. I could hardly believe we finally found it. We walked for 2.5 hours and it was less than a half mile from the Bronco. All I could think was, we had to get inside. We finally got in. And then we didn't say anything at all. We didn't talk.
Ed and Paul had become victims of hypothermia, a physical condition caused by a person's body losing more heat than it produces. The result? A dangerously low body temperature. When Ed and Paul were outside, the conditions were perfect for hypothermia to set in. It was cold, and they were tired and wet. First, their bodies tried to generate more heat to combat the cold. They began to shiver. It was a losing battle. The constant exposure to cold, wet weather defeated this first line of their body's defense. Then, in order to keep the remaining heat concentrated in the body core, the brain, heart, and lungs, their bodies began to cut down blood circulation to their arms and legs. This gave their vital organs a fighting chance to continue functioning. But it also caused the loss of muscle control in their hands, legs, and arms. As their natural defenses gradually began to break down, they became more confused and disoriented. If they had not found the cabin, the cold would have defeated all their body's defenses, and they would have died. In this kind of emergency, the first thing to do is get out of the cold. Then, carefully begin rewarming the body. The most important areas to rewarm first are those areas nearest the body core, the sides of the chest, the neck, the groin, and the head. These are the areas of highest heat loss and highest heat absorption. Warming these areas first lets the body build back and hold its heat, starting with the body core and gradually spreading to the rest of the body. Ed and Paul did not rewarm themselves correctly. They began by warming their hands and feet, and that could have killed them. Warming the body's extremities first forces cold blood to flow back to the body core. The result is usually death. Paul went to bed that night shivering uncontrollably because his body had not been rewarmed properly. Both men needed medical assistance desperately. It's a miracle they survived. Part of the miracle was the cabin they broke into. It was owned by a man who believed in being prepared for anything.
Once we got warmed up, we found plenty of wood for the fire. Besides, there was a propane tank to heat the cabin too.
There was plenty of food, enough to last us a couple of weeks. And you could eat it right out of the can. You didn't need a stove to cook it on.
Nothing. Well, they know we're gone. Yeah, they should.
Candles, flashlights, lanterns. All were on hand with plenty of batteries and fuel to keep them working. Ed and Paul even found a battery-powered radio. It was a relief to hear that rescuers were out looking for them. The cabin had a well-stocked first aid kit, too. Ed and Paul were stranded way up in the mountains, far from any help. But even in a city, snowstorms can be dangerous, especially for the elderly. The elderly can fall victim to hypothermia even at home. It's essential for them to maintain warm room temperatures of 68 degrees Fahrenheit or more. Continued exposure to low room temperatures can easily cause older people to become hypothermic, and it is very difficult to detect.
Your turn now.
They usually don't shiver as hypothermia takes hold, but their breathing may become shallow and their heartbeat may slow down. Either of these symptoms during cold weather means medical help is needed immediately. The best cure, of course, for anyone is prevention. Stay warm all the time, eat well and regularly, and keep physically fit. These factors will help protect you from winter cold.
Did you get back to the clinic this morning? Good.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Coastal water forecast here. East to southeast 15 on the south coast, with the seas, though, up to 12 to 14 feet. East winds at 10, turn southeast to 20 for the far north coast there. Seas 9 to 11 feet. Northwest 15, Clarence Strait. Swinging around to the south, 15, Stevens Passage, and up to 20 knots for Northern Link Canal. Then on Wednesday, pick those winds up. Small craft advisories. Southeast 25 for Northern Link Canal, 15 knots Stevens Passage. Light northwest breeze there for Clarence Strait. West 15 for the south coast. Southwest 20 with 10-foot seas on the north coast. And for Prince William Sound, southeast 25 knots tomorrow. Same thing here for all of the North Gulf Coast with 9 to 10-foot seas. And also southeast 25 here for the Barren Islands, 10-foot seas. Only 10 knots for tomorrow for Kachemak Bay. Northeast 20 though, Southern Cook Inlet, 15 for the north. And for the Wednesday outlook, real light winds here north of the Forelands from the northeast, but southeast 30 knots kicking in here south of, or the southern inlet with gales into Kachemak Bay. Southerly gales here, Barren Islands and the western North Gulf Coast falls under that category. The small craft advisories there for the east side. Southeast 30, 7-foot seas in the forecast for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, east side there. South 25 knots, 10-foot seas, lighter for Shelikof Strait. Sitkinak Sitkinak on over to Castle Cape, southwest 30 knots, and then from Castle Cape all the way to Cape Sarachev, south 40. Storm warnings there on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula with gusts as high as 65 knots, southeast 30, Bristol Bay. And then for the Wednesday outlook, lighter winds now, southeast 30, still pretty good stiff breeze. 12-foot seas on the Bering Sea side, south 30 with 21-foot seas now for the Pacific side, south 20 for Bristol Bay, and 40-knot winds there for Kodiak Island, back to Castle Cape, Shelikof Strait a little lighter. And for the Aleutians, storm warnings, all areas tomorrow. Southerlies 55 with gusts 65 knots there across the eastern Aleutians, 25-foot seas on the Pacific side. And southwest 50 knots out here to the west, Adak and Atka 55 knots, 32-foot seas, 40 to 45 feet out west. And then for Wednesday, northwest 40, pick it up to 45 knots, west central Aleutians, central Aleutians gales, west northwest 35 to 40 knots, south 40 to 45 there, and a little more variable, call it south 35 to 40 for the Unalaska Island zone. And then for the southwest coast tomorrow in the afternoon, these winds coming up to gale force, 40 knots south of Nunivak Island, east coming up to 35 late in the afternoon, north of Nunivak Island, east 25 for St. Lawrence Island. And the Pribilofs, storm warnings, southeast 50 knots, 20-foot seas, east 45, 22-foot seas there for St. Matthew Island. And for Wednesday, southeast come down to 25 for the Pribilof, seas slowly subsiding to 17. And south 25, south of Nunivak Island, actually the entire southwest coast, 25 knots. And then swinging around to the northeast, 35 knots. Gales continue for St. Lawrence Island. Maximum gales for the St. Matthew Island zone with 26-foot seas. Up along the, from Wales up to Cape Beaufort, 10 to 15 knots from the east, and then Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, south at 10. Also for the west side, southwesterlies 15. Central coast, just a 10-knot breeze for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And not much change, really light winds, mostly in an offshore direction here for the central and eastern coast. East pick up to 15, 20 knots here for the western capes, and then 25 knot small craft advisories there for Kotzebue Sound. Excuse me. Tonight again, intense front pushing eastward. High wind warnings out to 10 p.m. Western Aleutians. High wind warnings out all night for the central Aleutians. That's for winds gusting to 80 miles an hour. And this system here will begin to spread more moisture. Kodiak spreads up into south central Alaska. Next system brings more rain to the southern panhandle. And for Wednesday, that front pushes eastward, starts the weekend, but look for gusty winds, heavy rain along the North Gulf Coast. Another batch of wind and rain as that low center tracks eastward, weakens slowly, coming into the Fox Islands, eventually the Alaska Peninsula. And it looks like rain will spread into the northern panhandle in the afternoon with snow back across the Seward Peninsula.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.